in some ways, this being a Holy Week for Jews, for Christians, and as Ramadan continues for Muslims, my message in many ways supplants kind of your overall theme, which is nature this month. And we're just at the beginning of April, so I wanted to bring in a little bit of taste of connecting to nature as part of our centering, and then I'll offer my message. And so just want to invite people. I'm going to offer a prayer from Reb Nachman of Bratslav, who was a rabbi who lived in times not unlike ours. He felt besieged by the environment around him and felt really the weightiness of the oppressive systems that kept him down. And one of his kind of prescriptions to his students was to go outdoors each day and find a little bit of time in order to offer some kind of connection to the larger world, to get out of our individual story and connect to the larger story of creation. And so if it's comfortable for you, as we begin to center and take a little bit of a moment for ourselves, I invite you to either close your eyes or soften your gaze. If it's comfortable, again, everything I do is an invitation, so please do what's comfortable for you. I invite you to feel the ground beneath you, putting both feet on the floor in front of you. And just connect to your breath as we receive this loving meditation. Grant me the ability to be alone. May it be my custom to go outdoors each day among the trees and grass, among all growing things. And there may I be alone, and enter into prayer to talk with the one to whom I belong. May I express there everything in my heart, and may the foliage of the field, all grasses, all the trees, the plants, awaken at my coming, to send the power of their life into the words of my prayer, so that my prayer and speech are made whole through the life and the spirit of all growing things. Breathe. Which are made as one by their transcendent source. May I then pour out the words of my heart before your presence like water. Source of all, lift up my hands to you on my behalf and on the behalf of our children. Breathe. I invite you to open your eyes. Like my ancestors, this particular Passover I want to share with you, I was a stranger in a strange land. Though I was in Babylon, not Egypt. No, I wasn't in modern-day Iraq. Instead, I happened to be on this first night of Passover in the only gay bar in Minsk, Belarus. Yes, it was aptly named Babylon. What was even more surreal is that I found myself on stage addressing the crowd. Unbeknownst to me, I had become the opening act before the drag queens of Minsk took the stage. Little did I know when that night began that this would become perhaps the most profound experience of Passover that I would ever have as a rabbi. My night in Babylon has become a powerful story, embedded in the larger story of Passover, even echoing some of the same powerful aspects of how stories can transform, heal, and form identity. When we delve into why Jews celebrate Passover the way we do, we uncover a universal message about the necessary sacred power of story to discover who we are and what we stand for. But let me set the table, so to speak. What is Passover? Passover is one of the most significant and meaningful Jewish holidays. In fact, it is the most celebrated holiday of all the Jewish holidays. It's steeped in rich Jewish customs and traditions that have been observed for over thousands of years. It is a time of remembrance, reflection, and renewal, where Jews around the world gather together around tables and meals to commemorate the exodus from Egypt and the very beginnings of the Jewish nation. The Exodus narrative at the center of the Passover ritual is the story of the Israelites' liberation from slavery in the narrow places and their journey through the Sea of Reeds, not the Red Sea, greatest typo ever. According to the biblical account in the book of Exodus, the Israelites were enslaved in Egypt for several centuries until God sent Moses to lead them out of bondage. After a series of plagues that afflicted Egypt, Pharaoh finally relented and allowed the Israelites to leave. However, he quickly changed his mind and pursued the Israelites with his army. They found themselves trapped at the shore of the Sea of Reeds, but God performed a miracle and parted the sea so that they could cross onto dry land. At its core, Passover is a celebration of freedom and redemption. It takes an enslaved people and it transforms them into a united group with a sense of purpose. It reminds us of the struggle and sacrifice that our ancestors went through to break free through the chains of oppression. And through a series of rituals and symbolic acts, Jews at our Passover table are transported back in time to relive the journey of the Israelites from Egypt to the Promised Land. The center of the Passover celebration is the Seder, a special meal that takes place on the first 2 nights of the holiday. The Seder is carefully choreographed. Well, it depends on your table, to be honest. But it's where family and friends come together to retell the story. The very word Seder means order. So you, ritual by ritual, tasting food by food, recount the narrative in a very palpable way. We come together to retell the story of Exodus using a Haggadah, which means the telling. The Seder includes a number of symbolic foods, each representing a different part of the story. And as tradition evolves, new foods, props, and toys have been created, all to enhance the nature of the storytelling of the night. In fact, Jews have created hundreds, if not thousands, of Haggadot, ritual guides that differ in how they tell and what aspects of the story they emphasize. It is so embedded in the practice that we do not realize how much these rituals started because our ancestors understood the powers of storytelling to teach and embody and transform. I believe a highly orchestrated form of storytelling became the path of choice to observe this holiday. We don't really do this for any other holiday because the commandment to observe Passover is unique. It is directed that we tell the story so that we can teach our children about the miracles and wonders that were performed on behalf of our ancestors. But when we look closely at the Torah, in Exodus 13:8, it says, "And you shall tell your child on Passover," your child. It is because of what the source of all did for me when I came out of Egypt. So not only are we telling this for the sake of our children, but we're saying I. We are locating it as if we were the ones who went through this experience. This is the source of where the primary observance of Passover becomes telling the story. But take a moment. In order for any of us to say, this is what was done for me, we must locate ourselves in the story and represent the story like we actually lived it. But then the Talmud, an ancient commentary on the Torah, takes it one step further. Discussing the proper ways of fulfilling the commandment, Rabbi Yosef teaches that a parent should start by asking their child, "What is the significance of this ritual to you?" Thus begins an invitation for this ritual storyteller to open up a portal to the past and invite ourselves and our children to step through the threshold and into the past and imagine together as if we ourselves had experienced the hardships of a crushing systemic oppression and the liberating wonders culminating through singing and dancing. Rabbi Shmuel Herzfeld teaches that the Passover Seder is a time when we bring the story of our people to life for our children so that they can feel connected to their heritage and inspired by the values that we have sustained and have sustained us for thousands of years. In other words, we create a portal to the land of memory. We invite our children year after year to think and reflect upon this story as if it had happened to all of us. This potency, when done well and consistently, creates a transformation. Not only is there an invitation, but there's actual permission to claim this sacred story as our own story. Let me be clear, the Exodus story is not any story. It is the Jewish master story. Recently, a friend told me that they heard a rabbi describe how Jews read the Torah every year, from start to finish, broken into weekly chapters, as the world's oldest book club. The Exodus story is the aspect from that larger narrative that we hold up as our collective memory, that we all were there. So that we don't just read it, we enact it, we interrogate it, we eat it, we taste it, we sing about it, so that we might find ourselves within it. It is no longer a story just about our ancestors. It's a story about us. And that is what we want people to experience as they grow up, so that they have a story that they can claim as their own. To what end? Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, former chief rabbi of Great Britain that we heard earlier this morning, said that the story of Exodus is not simply just a story of the past. It is a living story that shapes our present and our future. It teaches us that freedom is the foundation of human dignity, and that we must never stop fighting for justice and liberty for all people. It is to that end that we teach our children this story. And let me pause and ask all of you, as individuals, as Unitarians, what stories serve this kind of purpose in your life? You heard a call of stewardship this morning. What inspires you? What invites you into this ongoing connection with freedom and liberation for all living things, each person and our planet? How do your sacred stories invite you to inhabit them, to live them out? For me, the Exodus story is both a part of my collective memory, it is who I am, but it is also my worldview. It is how I engage in the moment. We heard a vision of what an activist is this morning. It is through this story that I became an activist. It is through this story that when I stand with others, I've been accused sometimes in this city that I care more about other people than I do about the Jewish community, or what has been literally said is I care more about racism than I care about anti-Semitism, which is a little bit painful. But what I've said is that every time that I show up with another community, I'm fighting anti-Semitism without saying a word. Because I embody the story of the Jewish people when I show up. And it is this story that calls me to show up. So, for me, this is the power of sacred storytelling. Unitarian Universalist minister Reverend Kathleen McTeague believes that storytelling is the most powerful way we have of sharing and understanding our common humanity. In both form and content, in the ways Jews have chosen to tell the Passover story, the repetition of the story, and the importance of its meaning, freedom and dignity belong to everyone. And it allows us to connect to both the tribal nature of the story and its universal connection. So this is why, when I joined 3 other Jews from Atlanta on a mission trip to Minsk, Belarus, where my own ancestors come from, I wanted to connect with people not just within the Jewish community, but beyond the Jewish community. Our direct mission was to lead Passover Seders throughout Minsk and the surrounding areas. The 10 days I was there, I must have led at least 30 Passover Seders. If you've ever been to a Passover Seder, we eat horseradish, bitter herbs. That was a lot of horseradish. Most of these Seders, of course, were abridged as people were encountering this ritual. Jews were encountering this ritual for the first time because they lived in a regime that had not allowed them to engage in their own story. In many ways, all around the world, there is this kind of cultural genocide that happens where we sever people from their own rituals and stories. And so here I was with the privilege of introducing this kind of storytelling back. And so I didn't just want to do that. As I led the Seders, we connected with school children, the elderly, and those Jews who lived in the city and surrounding countryside. Even though there was a little bit of freedom, as I discussed, the atmosphere in 2003 was tense. We had bodyguards accompanying us everywhere we went. I was not permitted to wear my yarmulke in public. We were forbidden to leave our bodyguard's sides and explore on our own. And when we arrived at the hotel, we were not permitted to leave. Sadly, for my organizers, but better for storytelling, I'm a rule breaker. For you see, you couldn't tell, could you? I had contacted, before I left, a human rights organization promoting the rights of LGBT people before I had arrived in Minsk. These freedom fighters took great risks to promote human rights in an oppressive regime. And for the same reasons that being Jewish publicly was a safety risk, so was being gay. And on my second night in Minsk, I got to meet them. And they were just a small group of graduate students, just a few years younger than me at that time. They met me in the hotel lobby. As I said, other than when we were on our mission, we weren't allowed to leave the hotel. It was really their opportunity to scope me out. As they later confided in me, they weren't sure. Sometimes Americans come in and judge their means and their methods of organizing. Luckily, I had passed muster. Like most of the students I had met, they looked undernourished and as if they were barely making ends meet, which they confirmed as I listened to their life stories that evening as they whisked me out of the hotel onto a subway, exploring the entire city. We made plans to meet again that Friday night. They wanted to show me Babylon. That Friday night was the large community Seder in the Jewish Community Center of Minsk. As we told the story and spoke with our table mates, despite the celebratory nature of Passover, I could feel the weightiness of Belarusian poverty and oppression. We were having this Seder thanks to the contributions from Jews worldwide. And in addition, I felt that the Passover story in this context was not just imaginary. President Alexander Lukashenko was a modern-day pharaoh, still is. And the Jews lived under an oppressive regime where it was not entirely safe to claim their full selves. Let my people go had the real urgency of our ancestors in that moment. Passover became a springboard into hope and an opportunity for them to drink lots of cognac. But that's for another time. When we sang at the end, next year in the Promised Land, it tinged with the real promise and possibility of leaving Belarus. Back at the hotel after the Seder, momentarily, the LGBT human rights leaders met me and whisked me off in a taxi to a giant, nondescript Soviet bloc monstrosity of a building where Babylon was housed on the 5th floor. Along the way in the drive, they broke the news to me. I'm never fond of conversations that start with, "Josh, we have a surprise for you." We made a decision that we hope you will be okay with. As you know, we are poor students. We cannot really afford to get into Babylon, but we remembered the owner is a Jewish man. So we called him and we told him that a gay rabbi was in town. He was incredulous. He had never heard of such a thing. He wanted to meet you. So in order for us to get in for free, we had to promise him that you would speak to the entire club tonight. So I was a younger rabbi, not always as comfortable with public speaking as I am today. I was still in a bit of culture shock, feeling the weightiness of everything. I was in the midst of going from one community to the next. I wasn't sure I was up for the task. But this is how I found myself on stage, facing hundreds of LGBT Belarusians. The club owner told me, just offer a message of hope. Tell them about the changes that are possible, that are happening in your country. But I felt just as reluctant as Moses. Who was I to offer hope to people living in such a repressive culture? Outing myself as a rabbi has never been such a great experience, even here in Georgia, even in Marietta. And I grew up here. And as I thought about how I've lived here in the South, I thought that the LGBT community itself has not always been so receptive to the idea of gay religious leaders. It certainly has brought many dates to an awkward end. But my new friends and the club owner insisted that it would be exciting. It would even blow their mind. The club owner joked, "Come on, doesn't a rabbi believe that even Babylon needs spirituality?" So while there was no burning bush, there was a disco ball emanating sparks of light, enticing me to see that this too was holy ground. Thus, on the first night of Passover that year, I was rushed on a stage to a disco version of a traditional Jewish melody that we play at our celebrations. With a translator, I told people the Passover story. This night celebrates the people saying no to their oppression and finding ways to live their authentic truths. The source of life is on the side of freedom, I proclaimed. And as I began to explain the small steps of LGBT liberation in the U.S., while marriage was not legal in our country then, it had become legal just months ago in Massachusetts. Each time I spoke about freedom, the crowd erupted in cheers. Each time I offered a vision of hope, the crowd clapped. I was leading a Passover pep rally. When I wrapped up, they played the same disco version of the Jewish song, as all of a sudden the drag queens appeared from behind the screen on stage, standing right behind me. One of them pulled me close to her, hugged me, and whispered in my ear, "Nobody knows this, but I'm Jewish too." She then planted a big red lipstick print on my cheek, like blood on the doorpost, making me safe from harm. It was clear at that moment what storyteller Clarissa Pinkola Estes wrote. Stories are medicine. They have such power. They do not require that we do, act, anything. We need only listen. The remedies for repair or reclamation are contained in stories. This very strange act of storytelling on stage in Babylon was healing for them, and it was healing for me. Later on that evening on the dance floor, people came up to me, and just as the drag queen before them began to out themselves as Jewish to me. I've never told this to anybody, but I'm Jewish. How strange. My world was upside down. Never had I thought it would be more important to keep one's Jewish identity in the closet while living out their queer one. But on Passover itself, where memory inspires the moment, people found the access to claim a hidden part of their identity with pride and love. In Babylon, they stepped into a fuller claiming of themselves. Together, we moved from the narrow place to the expanse. And as for me, as a gay rabbi, my personal story and my people's story united as one. My Passover in Babylon will always be a part of my Passover story and a part of why I know how stories can transform. I was transformed that evening. My world turned upside down. I had a broader understanding of how stories unite us. May each and every one of us know the dignity and the freedom to claim who we are and to be inspired to create a world where everyone, especially our children, can do the same. Thank you. got deployed in many ways today. So friends, as we near the end of the service, I just want to presence the opportunity. I'm going to step back and say something. Now that I'm out of congregational life, I can pull back the veil a little bit about my experience where, when I first started as a rabbi, I was very eager to hear whether I did a good sermon or did a bad, but it was really about what it is that I delivered. Over the years, what became more and more clear and more important is much less interested in whether something was good or bad, but what did it speak to the heart and the life of the listener. And so we can easily be entertained by good storytelling. That's one of the things that good storytelling does. It can be entertaining. It can take us to new places. But part of what we do as a community that has an intention, that has a mission and a vision like you have here, is that we actually invite storytelling to do something a bit more profound, to have it actually resonate. And so there's a little bit of work to be done, which is like, how does this sit with me? And sometimes that can lead into a good conversation of conflict, and sometimes it can create a good conversation around resonance. But at the end of the day, being able to discuss the story, to be able to kind of see ourselves in it feels incredibly important. And so I want to offer you these words by Imam Khalid Latif, who says, "The stories we tell have the power to shape our understanding of the world, to heal our wounds, and to help us imagine a better future for ourselves and for others." To me, that's a pretty profound task of what storytelling can do. It also is really in line with your mission as I read it. And so I want to presence the invitation that I embedded somewhere in the middle of what I offered you, which is to leave you with the thoughts of, what are your guiding stories? What are your guiding stories as a congregation? What are your guiding stories as a family? What are your guiding stories that lead you as a group of friends? What are your personal guiding stories? I think it's always helpful and honest and earnest. And what I love about Unitarians is that there's a willingness to deeply engage and interrogate your own traditions. Are your stories working for you? Are the stories that guide us and that we carry with us, do they work for us in this moment? Are they aligned with what our purpose is and what the world needs? And if they are, that's great. And if they're not, is it time to find new stories or even create new stories? And so I'd love for all of us to kind of leave with those thoughts, much more so whether something was enjoyable or not. Is there something that moved you to think about your story in a different way? Have a good day.